that can help us measure those things. That this is not new. I think it's, we're just changing the emphasis to a different syllable, so to speak.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Talent Transformation webcasts are brought to you by the Talent Transformation Guild to help you understand and prepare for the new world of work.
Hello, I'm Eric Shepherd, and I'll be the host of today's webcast, along with my friend and co-founder of the Talent Transformation Guild, Martin Belton. Welcome, Martin.
Hi there. Hi, Eric. Thank you for that, and great to be here, and looking forward to talking to today's guest.
Well, today, Martin, we have Stephen Forth from Ibbaka, but has a long history in the technology space. Stephen, welcome.
Thank you very much, Martin and Eric. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Me too. Your focus has been bringing new concepts to market by combining design and decision-making frameworks and value management and pricing strategies. Your goal is to ensure a fit between the offer, its underlying technology, and the market opportunity, and the revenue process and the ability to organize at scale, which is very impressive. And I know that at the moment you're heavily involved in Ibbaka. I'd love for you to explain something about Ibbaka and what you guys do there.
So Ibbaka began as a collaboration between 4 people, some of whom are well known in the HR community. So Amar Dhaliwal, who was the Chief Product Officer for Saba at one point. Lee Iverson, who is a computer scientist specializing in artificial intelligence and the application of artificial intelligence to messy problems. And Karen Chang, who has been my business partner in a number of ventures. And we started Ibbaka with the idea that the way we had approached HR and human capability development in the learning management system industry had been dead wrong. And Amar and I used to joke that we had started Ibbaka to atone for our sins. And we started this with a strong, almost a religious conviction that information about skills, what they mean, how they're used, how they're put together, had to bubble up from the bottom. And that was the initial design for the Ibaka talent platform. And that seemed to work. And we built up several thousands of users. We had some interesting customers. But the more we worked with large companies, the more we realized that this bottom-up approach by itself was not going to do what needed to be done. That both the organizations and the individuals needed more guidance than that. And so working with a number of fairly large global companies, we came to 2 conclusions really. One is that competency models were an essential part of the equation. Without the framing of a competency model, without its ability to act as a lens into how skills are organized and also as a beacon for where you need to go, that this aspiration we had of helping people to understand and fulfill their potential, both for individuals and for organizations, just wasn't going to work, that you needed both sides. You needed the bottom up, bubbling up of skills and interests and aspirations, but you also needed some sort of framework with which to organize those. And then the second part of it was that, so the organization needed it, but the individual also needed it. Let's say that I had an aspiration to become a data scientist. At my age, that would probably be a very foolish aspiration, but I need to be able to look at the career paths, at the skill sets, at the roles that people who are successful data scientists have. And without that, I'm sort of swimming, I'm swimming in too big an ocean. And so our initial vision of a bottom-up system proved incomplete, which is how we got to competency models.
It makes a lot of sense. It's interesting you use the metaphor of swimming in the ocean, because as you were talking, it was reminding me of maps and how do you get from A to B. And at one point, that was incredibly difficult, sailing the ocean. It wasn't until we invented the sextant, Martin probably remembers that, and maybe
Oh,
you
yeah.
do, but it was before my time. But navigation became easier. Now, competence is, as some people have said, is the longest four-letter word in HR, because they are so troublesome to not only produce but also maintain. And so I know your platform is going to help you with that, and with the new technologies like natural language processing, machine learning, and AI, I think we have some tools at our disposal to actually make competencies really useful, just like the sextant changed navigation across the ocean. I think these combination of tools with well-defined competencies are going to help help people navigate and organizations navigate. And just a little plug, we're both on the working group with the IEEE to define competencies to kind of bring stakeholders together to improve communications. So thank you for that. Great introduction. Just turning the conversation slightly, I think you're aware we've been conducting surveys and focus groups to better understand the challenges that our followers and subscribers and members have been dealing with. And the themes that we're hearing, especially from the C-suite, is around resilience and planning in the face of uncertainty, because COVID-19 has brought so much uncertainty from business models to workplace to technology. It's easy for me to say. What advice are you currently giving to C-suite executives at this time?
Yeah, so I think what you're saying is very true, Eric, that looking at our own data and at how things have evolved over the last years, I think the first thing that we realized is that when times are good, when there's an established consensus, when business is stable, when things are growing, that organizations naturally gravitate towards efficiency. And they redesign their processes. There's a lot of focus on process optimization, and really driving efficient results. Companies are rewarded for having a single goal that they're trying to achieve. And you can see that in their competency models and in their skills. So if you look at the skills prior to, say, the last 2 months, there's been a real focus on technical skills and business skills and even tools. Probably tools come ahead of technical skills, and then business skills are layered in. And that's because of this huge economic and commercial pressure to move towards efficiency. But as we know, efficient systems are not resilient systems. And what COVID-19 did is it tested systems for their resilience. Because before you can get to adaptation, you have to survive. And you need some resilience in order to survive. So there's this interesting set of interactions where efficiency reduces resilience. And then there's a shock. Sometimes it's an internal shock. Sometimes it's an industry shock. Sometimes it's a global shock, like the COVID-19 pandemic, which really then tests these systems and to see if they're resilient. And the ones that are not resilient break and fall apart, as we saw recently in Vancouver with one of my favorite organizations, the Mountain Equipment Co-op, which failed dismally. But other systems proved to be resilient. And resilience is not a goal in itself. Resilience is what you need in order to buy time for adaptation. Because I think we can see now that the idea that the world was going to snap back to normal in 6 months or 12 months or 18 months, it's just not going to happen. This pandemic, like most other global pandemics, is forcing deep structural change on the economy, on how people think, on how we live our lives. And that means that the skills needed have changed as well. So one of the terms I truly despise is that of soft skills. And I think soft skills is it's a mind deadening construction that does not allow you to think deeply about what the true nature of skills are. So at Ibaka, we actually categorize skills differently. We have foundational skills, which are the skills that you use in order to build new skills. Social skills, which are the skills that you use to work with other people. And then we have the normal categories of business skills, technical skills, tool skills, to which we have added design skills, because design is importantly different from business or technical skills. And it's increasingly important through design thinking and service design and innovation. And then there's also domain knowledge, which is very important. So what we are finding is that the organizations that have strong resilience have strong social skills. That you need those social skills in order to flex and adapt and change, to make that transition from working at an office to a large part of your workforce working at home. But then as adaptation comes to the fore, which I believe it will over the next year, then foundational skills and domain skills become much more important, because we need to learn new skills. And it's your foundational skills that allow you to do that. We need to rethink our domains and how we approach them. Think of the impact in the medical technology industry that COVID-19 is having. And the differences in demands on how we're going to deliver vaccines, how we're going to deliver treatments. An organization that is optimized on efficiency is not going to be able to bring in the different forms of domain knowledge, combine those with foundational skills, leverage its social skills to build new networks in order to deliver these massive vaccine programs. Canada's a small country with 36 million people, and the estimate is that we are going to need to deliver around 200 million doses of vaccines. Take a larger company, and this becomes a truly huge problem of supply chain, of logistics, of design controls. It's going to be very complex, and it's going to need us to develop new skills, new ways of thinking in order to deliver it. Sorry, I went off on a bit of a rant there, but...
That makes a lot of sense, but you do prompt the question, why do Canadians need 200 million vaccines if there's only 39 million of you? I mean, are you more resilient? You need to be vaccinated more?
No, I think if you look at most of the vaccines that are in the pipeline, they require more than one dose.
I see. Okay.
Oh, really?
And the viruses, and we have a lot to learn from viruses. Mm-hmm. Viruses are not bad things. If viruses stopped functioning, our ecosystems would fail pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that viruses do is that they are very good at mutating and changing. So, and they're in an ongoing competition with the cell's internal evolution. So, to think that there's going to be one vaccine and there, done, dusted, the problem solved, that's delusional.
Can I just leap in there, Stephen, because I thought that was fascinating what you were saying there about efficiency and resilience and the change towards seeking better resilience. Eric and I are always fascinated in what we call organisational readiness and KPIs for measuring that readiness. So this may be a silly question, but what KPI should we be looking for? Do we need new KPIs to be thinking about measuring organisational resilience, or do we need different things to KPIs, key performance indicators, and should we be looking elsewhere?
It's a great question, Martin. I'm not sure that the KPIs are new, but certain KPIs need to be brought to the fore. So the really deep work on resilience has been done by an ecosystems guy, C.S. Holing, who's really done deep research in what leads to a resilient ecosystem. And I think there are many things from that that we can bring over to our understanding of organizations, and even at least tangentially to competency models. So some of the things that that lead to a resilient ecosystem are redundancies. Redundancies are the enemy of efficiency,
Right.
but they are critical. So, you know, as you look at your organization, do you have a certain depth of skills? But let's take a complex skill or competency, such as I'm going to pick on design thinking because I'm deeply involved in the design thinking community. Now, there are different patterns of underlying skills that lead to a competency in design thinking. For some people, they may be deeply grounded in classical design approaches, in design methodologies, know the touch points. Other people may be much more focused on usability, on service design, on empathy, and still others may be taking a systems level approach and looking at design patterns and how patterns interact. All three of these are different ways of doing design thinking. And for a system to be resilient in any of its core functions, you need to have people who are able to take different approaches to the same problem. And that helps to build resilience. So you need redundancy, but it's not just simple redundancy. It's redundancy that allows different perspectives to arise. And this is, I think, where the work on diversity comes in. When we talk about diversity, we're often talking about cultural or gender or orientation and things like that. But I think the really critical forms of diversity, and those are important things, and they're the groundwork. But the kinds of diversity that will lead to resilience and adaptability are more things in diverse cognitive styles, diverse communication styles, diverse emotional styles, and organizations that figure out how to cultivate and accept and work with true diversity, I think are going to be much more resilient, which is the precursor to becoming adaptive. And we have KPIs that can help us measure those things. That this is not new. I think it's we're just changing the emphasis to a different syllable, so to speak.
Okay. Great, thank you.
That's great. So I completely agree with what you said. It was it was wonderful to listen to you explain that. One of the challenges, so if we have diversity of thought, diversity of gender, of race, of style, communication styles, we're still dealing with an uncertain future. And so in an uncertain future, we have to plan to a greater or lesser degree for different scenarios. So as a leader of an organization, you'd say, well, if this, then this, and if this, then this. And with there's so many uncertainties in the age of COVID-19 pandemic, then how can we effectively plan with so many variables? Is there a good framework that we could reference in this current environment?
Yeah, so I think that's a very important question, Eric, and it's one that has come up in a number of our conversations with our customers, because these organizations, the best of them, are now trying to prepare themselves and their workforce and their communities and stakeholders for the future. And it's a very uncertain future. Now, I think we all know the classical scenario planning approach, in which one surfaces critical uncertainties, chooses a small number, usually 2, from which to construct scenarios, and then prepares one's organization for those scenarios. And those scenarios tend to be used in 3 different ways. One is just to enable rapid response. And this is what Shell did in its classic first oil crisis situation, where because they had already imagined the scenario of a supply side shock, they were able to rapidly respond. So that's one use of scenarios. A second use is what has been used in urban planning, mostly in Europe, mostly in the Netherlands actually, in which any major investment has to be viable across multiple different scenarios. So we don't know the future, we can't be sure what's going to happen, but we want to make sure that large investments are going to be viable no matter what future emerges. And then a third common use of scenarios is aspirational. So if we think of the famous Montfleur scenarios that were developed for South Africa, as Nelson Mandela left prison and the major South African corporations and government and resistance movements realized that this could go very bad. It could go very good or it could go very bad. And they developed scenarios that sort of basically said, well, we may not be able to agree on the future we want, but we can certainly agree on the future we don't want. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And scenarios can be used to guide an organization towards an aspirational future. All of this is great. It's very important. It should be standard strategic planning, and it is failing in the age of COVID-19. Because, let's face it, I think most of us knew that there was a risk of a global pandemic at some point in our lifetimes, but very, very few organizations. I can only think of one. I'm sure there are others, but I actually only know of one, which is, of all things, a grocery chain in Texas, HEB, that was prepared for, actually was able to rapidly identify this critical uncertainty around the pandemic and respond. But that just, forces us to ask the question, what are the other critical uncertainties that we're missing? Mm-hmm. And I think we have to admit that we don't know and we can't know. So we need a different way of thinking about scenario planning. And the one that we are developing at Ibaka, we refer to as Agile Scenario Planning. And Agile Scenario Planning, I think, is different from classical scenario planning in that it shifts the focus from the final scenarios. And in classic scenario planning, a lot of work is done on deeply realizing those, and it's usually those four different scenarios, and telling stories and creating images and responses and going deep. And we need a different approach today, which is much more focused on the critical uncertainties and the ability to rapidly surface new critical uncertainties, such as the pandemic, so that we can start testing and expanding our minds to think about what the responses to those might be. So Agile Scenario Planning does a number of things. One is it moves the emphasis from the scenarios, the uncertainties, and gives you ways to rapidly combine those critical uncertainties so you can test different scenarios quickly. And then the other part that we believe is important is you have to sort of spread out your tentacles, or spread out your, I just watched that wonderful documentary, My Octopus Teacher. If you haven't seen it, it's great. But anyway, stretch out your antenna so you're detecting more signals. Mm-hmm. No organization has the signal detection capability within itself to pick up these weak early signals. So Agile Scenario Planning also has to be much more community-based. And to make a wild leap back to competency models, you can almost think of a competency model, especially an extended one that goes outside of your organization and connects different communities, as an antenna for detecting change. And critical uncertainties will actually show up in the feedback that you're getting through your competency model. Okay, I may have forced that metaphor as far as we can go at this point, but I do think it's important because agile scenarios are much more community-based, but I also think competency models need to be open. Mm-hmm. I used to work for Monitor Group, which is now part of Deloitte, and we built some very large competency models, and we were very proud of what we did. People gave us a lot of money. We built large, elaborate systems, and by the time we had them in place, they were obsolete.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
And that's going to be more and more true if competency models are closed, rigid, absolutist kind of structures.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I brought the agile scenario conversation back to competency models, but I do think there's some important linkages.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that we need to be able to do is critical uncertainties impact the kinds of skills, the kinds of competencies, the relevant KPIs that we need to be tracking.
It's an interesting concept of almost crowdsourcing critical uncertainties, and then potentially crowdsourcing what people believe is the impact of the various uncertainties. And we're coming to an age where we could probably build this into competency models as a competency to spot a critical uncertainty and raise it, and then the crowd could highlight that. Fascinating. Well, I was going to turn the conversation to the talent transformation pyramid. So we had interacted about this over the last couple of years, and I've written a book about it and spent a lot of time in focus groups and interviews trying to produce a model that's helpful. And it does try and tease apart some of the skills that you've been talking about. And by the time it gets to competencies, it's really dealing with behaviors and capabilities. So is someone capable of doing a job, and how they behave to do that job? And then that's supported. So if we think in that terms, which areas of the pyramid do you think will help in this age of uncertainty? Which of these will be impactful in helping organizations be agile?
So I don't think, sorry, Eric, I don't think that's quite the right way of phrasing the question, because the power of the pyramid is not in any one of its triangles. It's in its ability to integrate the different parts of human performance and organizational performance and bring them up to the top of the pyramid. So that I don't think there's one triangle in that period that is more important than the others. It's the power of the pyramid to connect the things that truly matters. And in the case of capabilities and behaviors, to put them in the larger context. Now we are about to at Ibbaka, we are about to share an open source tool for people to build competency models with. And we realized we needed some simple examples, because competency models can get complicated fast. And we wanted some very simple examples of what competency models could be. So one of the ones that we did was cybersecurity. Not cybersecurity for the cybersecurity expert, but cybersecurity for the average person. And now that we're all working from home in a distributed work-at-home workforce, the importance of this is has just been increased greatly. And here is where I think the concept of behavior is central, right? There are certain behaviors, one could almost say habits, that we need to grow and in order to promote and enable cybersecurity. So behaviors are clearly very important. But on the other hand, there are emerging disciplines, and I don't think AI is an emerging discipline anymore. In fact, I think it's being commoditized quickly. But there are very, very specific and deep capabilities that are needed around probability and Bayesian networks and a certain probabilistic way of thinking about the world. And there's actually a mindset that switches one from thinking in terms of causality to probabilistic causality, and that's a difficult shift for people to make. Einstein, admitted that he could not make that shift, and he was I'm pretty sure a lot smarter than most of us. But I know that I struggle to make that shift as well. To understand that probability is real and deeply embedded in systems and has to be part of our thought. So to come back to your question, for different purposes, one part of the pyramid may be more important than others, such as behaviors when it comes to introducing cybersecurity across a large organization. But that's very contextual. And the real power of the pyramid is that it pulls the parts together.
Yeah, well, I love it. And a skill I have to develop is to learn to ask better questions. Or is my internet becoming unstable? That's not good. Well,
yes, it's just a little unstable.
The internet itself actually functions as a Bayesian network, and probability is built into it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was really interested in the your point about the probabilities and that mattering when it came to the pyramid, and each section being kind of interdependent and on each other, and therefore which then reminds me about butterflies in the Himalayas affecting the weather and all that kind of stuff. I'm fascinated to hear more on that. We've seen COVID-19 come along, and that was something which most of us didn't see. We've also talked about we don't know what else is on the horizon, but how do we deal with capturing things so that we can build in that resilience? How do we actually imagine what's on the horizon? How do we build in a system which sees what's coming in on the horizon? What do we recommend for that?
So, this, as we live in an increasingly connected world in which probability is more and more apparent to us, and uncertainty is more and more apparent, it's going to force ourselves as individuals, but also organizations, to make big changes to their standard behavior. So let's just take something that's very important in HR: job descriptions. Do job descriptions as they exist today help organizations become resilient and adaptable? And do they help people really manage and shape their careers? And I would argue that they do not, because they are too tight, and they are too bound, and they're too constricting. And think of both of your lives. Are your lives defined by the jobs you've had? I don't think so. Could one have predicted the succession of different ways that you've contributed to the world just based on the job descriptions of your previous jobs? I very much doubt that. So one thing that we are seeing or that we think is going to happen, is that jobs are going to be pulled apart into roles. And we're going to think about our careers much more in terms of roles, and the different roles that we play, both in our community, in our family, in our profession, in our organization. We play roles on teams. We have our jobs are composed of roles, and most of us play ad hoc roles. And pulling things apart so that they can be put together rapidly in new ways is going to be critical to adapting to this more uncertain world. And part of that pulling apart is the notion that roles will become more important than jobs, and that roles are more fungible over a career than a progression of jobs are. So think of it as a skein of threads, of role threads braided into a career, rather than a series of steps that you go up. But this also relates back to the idea that in scenario planning, we have to put less emphasis on the scenarios and more emphasis on the uncertainties. So I think one of the things that we're doing is we are teasing, or not even teasing, we're pulling things apart into their component parts so that we can reassemble them more rapidly, and that people can take the different roles that they play in their lives and in their work and reassemble them rapidly in different scenarios and situations.
So Stephen, can you put then together the last link here, which is competencies into roles?
So coming back to this, this simple competency model is that we are providing as part of this tool. So one of them, as I said, was organized around behaviors, the security one. Another thing that I think many of us are seeing is that technical sales is becoming more and more important in a virtual environment. And that is not a job, because there are different roles in technical sales that are filled by different people. So one of the things that I think competency models need to do, and I think this will be important in the IEEE work, is to make sure that they are not just for jobs, but they also support, in certain contexts, roles, and in certain contexts, behaviors, in certain contexts, values. Values are also something that can be essential to a competency model in different situations. Mm-hmm. So there's this pulling apart of things, or modularization, that allows rapid recombination. And I think that that's going to be super important when we think about competency models.
Stephen, that's been fascinating. Thank you so much. Very enjoyable, great conversation. We really appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Well, thank you, Eric, Martin, and I look forward to carrying forward the conversation and to spreading it out through the work that you're going to be doing with the IEEE.
Thank you. We appreciate your participation.
Thank you, Stephen. That was great. Really interesting. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this webcast, please subscribe and like the show. And to learn and understand more about the new world of work, please visit www.talenttransformation.com. Subscribe and become a member. Thank you.